No, this happened just last summer. At the time, I was staying at my cousin's beach house in the Outer Banks. She and her fans had just gotten married and were on their honeymoon in Portugal, and they asked if I could house sit while they were away. It was supposed to be a 2-week getaway, easy enough. The house wasn't some tiny shack either. It was huge. 3 stories, right on the dunes, with big glass windows that overlooked the ocean. It sounded like a dream. I had just finished a stressful work project and really needed some alone time anyway. The idea of reading on the balcony, going for beach runs, and watching sunsets without a soul around, it was perfect. I packed my car with groceries, loaded a few books in my laptop, and drove down early on a Monday morning. The first few days were exactly what I hoped for. Peaceful. The beach was mostly empty since it wasn't peak season. Just the occasional dog walker or couple on a sunset stroll. At night, I'd crack open a beer, play music, and sit on the upper deck with nothing but stars and waves around me. It felt like I had the world to myself. But that changed on the 4th night. I had stayed out later than usual on the beach. There was a full moon that night, and the light reflecting off the water made everything feel almost silver. I brought a blanket, laid in the sand, and listened to the ocean. Around midnight, I noticed something odd. Footprints. Now, footprints themselves aren't strange. It's a beach, after all. But these were fresh. Still defined. Deep enough to be recent. They came from the direction of the dunes behind the house. But I hadn't seen anyone walk by. Not once. And here's the creepier part. There was only one set of prints. They led directly to where I was sitting. And stopped. Just stopped, like someone had been standing right behind me. I froze. Turned around. Nothing. I stood up and scanned the beach in every direction. Still nothing. Just the sound of the waves and the cool night breeze. The prints weren't mine either. I had walked in a wide arc to get there, and I was barefoot. These were clearly from boots. Heavy ones. I tried to laugh it off. Told myself it was a fisherman. Or maybe just someone taking a weird path through the dunes. Still, I felt off. Like I was being watched. I quickly folded my blanket and walked back toward the house, forcing myself not to look over my shoulder even though I wanted to. Once inside, I double-checked every door and window. Locked. Curtains drawn. Lights off. I told myself I was being paranoid. I even posted a casual beach selfie that night to try to feel normal again. But the unease didn't leave. Around 3:20 a.m., I woke up to a soft knock. At first, I thought I had imagined it. I lay still, waiting, holding my breath. Then I heard it again. Tap, tap, tap. Not loud. Just enough to be noticeable. The bedroom I was sleeping in was on the 2nd floor and faced the back of the house. The knocking. It wasn't coming from the front door. It was coming from the glass balcony door. That made no sense. I crept out of bed and tiptoed to the door without turning on the light. I wanted to see out, but not be seen. I stood off to the side and peeked through a gap in the curtain. Nothing. But then I noticed something strange, a smudge, right in the middle of the glass. Like a handprint. A palm, maybe. It hadn't been there before. I stared at it, trying to make out if it was old or fresh. And then I saw it. The figure. Not on the balcony, but down on the sand, maybe 30 feet from the house. Standing just outside the reach of the motion light. Not moving. Not walking away. Just standing there, looking up. At me. I couldn't see his face. Just his shape, tall, broad, almost. Too still. I stood frozen. Then I blinked, and he was gone. I didn't see him walk away. He didn't turn or drift into the shadows. He just vanished. I backed away from the glass, locked the door, and ran to the hallway to grab my phone. I didn't call the cops. I wasn't even sure what I'd report. There was a man looking at me from the sand. They'd laugh, or worse, not take it seriously at all. Instead, I went back to my room and barely slept. The next morning, I went outside to check. The smudge was still there. This happened about 2 years ago. My girlfriend's aunt owns a beach house in a small coastal town called Cape Allen. It's the kind of place that only fills up during summer months, quiet, old-fashioned, mostly retirees or vacation rentals. The house is old too. Built in the early 1900s, it sits about a block from the water, surrounded by these gnarled old driftwood fences and sand-worn cottages. We were invited to spend a long weekend there in the off-season. Her aunt said we could use the place while she was traveling. We figured, why not? A free beach getaway in April sounded pretty great. It was just the two of us, me and Eliza. We arrived Friday afternoon. The wind was strong, and there was that sharp, briny chill in the air. The house was charming but weathered. White siding with peeling paint, a front porch with wind chimes that never stopped moving, and this weird crescent window above the entry that looked like it belonged in a church. Inside, it was cozy. Wooden floors, mismatched furniture, and the faint smell of salt and dust. The rooms creaked when you walked across them, but that's kind of expected in a place like that. It felt lived in, which I didn't mind. We unpacked, explored a little, then went out for seafood and came back just after sunset. The night was uneventful. We lit some candles, played cards, watched a movie on her laptop, and eventually turned in early. The house had 3 bedrooms, 1 downstairs and 2 upstairs. We took the larger room up top, which had a view of the dunes. At some point during the night, I woke up to the sound of whistling. At first, I thought it was the wind, except it was too deliberate. It was 4 notes, repeated again and again, almost like someone trying to mimic a bird or call a dog. And it was coming from inside the house. I sat up. Eliza was still asleep, breathing softly next to me. I didn't want to wake her unless I was sure, so I listened. Whistle, 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 whistle. Then it stopped. I waited. Nothing. I got up and opened the bedroom door. The hallway was pitch black, but down at the far end, I saw a faint glow under one of the doors. The guest bedroom. I remembered something Eliza's aunt had told us when we arrived, that the far room upstairs should stay shut. Not because it was dangerous or anything, but because it was being used for storage. Boxes of old things, paintings, broken furniture. She had even taped a little sign to the door, "Do not enter." I hadn't thought twice about it until that moment. The light underneath that door was soft, flickering, like candlelight. And then I heard it again, that same 4-note whistle. But this time, it came from behind the door. I backed away. Every instinct in me screamed not to open it. I went back to our room and closed the door softly. I still didn't wake Eliza. I figured I'd deal with it in the morning, but I barely slept. Around 6 a.m., I finally dozed off. By 8, the sun was up and Eliza was already out of bed making coffee. I told her everything. She stared at me, half believing, half concerned. She's always been the skeptic between us. She thought it was a dream. Sleepwalking, maybe. I insisted it wasn't. She walked with me upstairs to the room. I half expected the door to be wide open, but it was shut. Still had the little sign taped across it. No light underneath now. I tried the knob, locked. And then something happened that made my blood run cold. Eliza knocked. Just a light tap, jokingly, like, "Hello? Anyone haunting in there?" And from inside the room, Something knocked back. Twice. Not loud, not aggressive, just answering. Alyssa jumped back so fast she nearly tripped over her own feet. Her face turned white. I didn't touch the door again. We packed our bags and left within the hour. She tried calling her aunt on the drive home, but didn't get an answer. We didn't tell anyone else. For a while, we didn't even talk about it. But a few months later, we went to a family event where her aunt was also attending. And during some casual conversation, Eliza asked her again, half seriously, what was up with that locked guest room. Her aunt went quiet. Then she said, "You didn't go in there, did you?" We said no, but we told her about the knocking and the whistle. Her face tightened. "I didn't want to say anything," she told us. "I didn't think you'd believe me. But years ago, when my mother was living there alone, she used to say she heard someone whistling at night. Same notes, always from that room." She paused. This happened last summer when I took a week off to travel solo along the coast. I was in a weird headspace at the time, burnt out, recently out of a relationship, and craving quiet. Not just silence, absence. I wanted to disappear for a bit without actually leaving a trace. That's probably what drew me to the coast, where time moves slower and everything feels a little disconnected from the rest of the world. Somewhere around the 5th day of my trip, I was driving through a coastal stretch of Oregon when my car started overheating. The check engine light came on, and then, not 5 minutes later, steam started pouring from under the hood. I pulled over immediately. There wasn't a gas station for miles. My cell service was garbage, one flickering bar that barely let text through. I tried a few towing companies, but none picked up. I waited for about an hour before I started walking. It was around 6 p.m. and the sun had already dipped low enough to paint the sky orange. About 10 minutes down the road, I saw something odd. A mailbox. Weather-beaten and rusted, with no numbers. Just a symbol etched into the side, a kind of looping swirl. Past the mailbox was a long gravel path. It twisted through a line of tall trees and curved out of sight. I walked it. I know that sounds dumb in hindsight, but something about the place felt still, peaceful, like time hadn't touched it. Eventually, the trees opened up and I saw it, a beach house. Small but picturesque. Washed out gray siding, a sagging porch, curtains fluttering in the windows like someone had just passed by. I called out, no answer. Knocked on the door, silence. And just when I was about to leave, it creaked open. It felt wrong to walk in, but I was desperate. I stepped into the entryway, which smelled like sun-bleached wood and something older, not rot, more like mildew trapped behind forgotten furniture. "Hello?" I called again. Still nothing. I was about to turn around when I noticed something weird. Everything in the house looked ready, like someone was expecting company. There were neatly folded towels on the hallway table, 2 coffee cups set on the kitchen counter, a kettle sitting on the stove. That's when I heard footsteps upstairs. Slow, deliberate. 1, 2, 3, then silence. I froze. Again, I said, "Hello?" Louder this time. No answer. Something about those footsteps chilled me. They weren't random. They sounded like someone waiting to be heard, like someone wanted me to know they were upstairs. I backed out of the house. I didn't run, just walked backwards down the steps and onto the gravel path. But I swear I felt eyes on me. The entire way back to the road, I didn't look back once. I didn't have to. I could feel it. The next morning, after spending the night sleeping in my car, I finally got a tow truck. The driver was a local guy in his 60s. Friendly, chatty, very coastal Oregon, if you know what I mean. I asked him if he knew who owned the beach house off the road with the swirl symbol on the mailbox. His smile faltered. What house? I described it, the siding, the mailbox, the trees, everything. He just shook his head. There's no house there. I told him I'd seen it the day before, walked up to it, even went inside. He went quiet for a while, then muttered something like, "You shouldn't have done that." I asked what he meant. He glanced over at me and said, "There's been stories, okay? Old ones. About a house that shows up when you're lost or alone. It doesn't belong to anyone. It doesn't have an address. And it doesn't always stay in one place." I laughed, thinking he was joking. But he didn't laugh back. He just said, "If you find it again, don't go inside. Don't even look at it too long." I tried to brush it off as superstition, but when I checked Google Maps later, there was no gravel road where I remembered walking. I even drove back a few days later to double check. Nothing. No mailbox,